Yeah.
All right, I'm rolling.
Get you a little
Skull.
go, yeah.
So my wife's from Staten Island.
That's where I live.
Yeah.
Yes. Whereabouts does she live in Staten Island?
Well, my wife is from Staten Island. They moved out of there when she was like about 4. So she's California girl now.
Oh, but was she actually born and raised on Staten Island?
Until she was 4.
Until she was 4. Oh, then it was all dirt.
Yeah, it was farms. Yeah.
Right.
That's what she said.
Yeah.
Okay, gonna try to keep this free flowing. You guys just pop in with each other. I'll just throw it out there. Okay, we all know that only 2 of us in this room got sunglasses when we graduated from boot camp, and we still have them.
Yeah, right.
Okay, you're all from PI, except for Virgil and I. Okay, so anyway, so what we're going to do is we're just going to cover time and country. Name of tankers you might recall, things like that, things that happen. Guys you served with.
Well, when I got to Vietnam, I got there January 17th of '69, and I was back in Don Hoffer till February 1st. Then I went out to the bush, and of course everything was new to me. I didn't know anybody out there except a friend of mine named Wayne Tunison. And Tunis stayed back in rear when I went out there, and I was introduced to Virgil and my tank commander Eddie Myers, and I was on Alpha 1-4, and that was the name of that tank was the Bleeding Eyes. And most of the guys that you knew over there, you don't know their real name. It was all nicknames like Short Round and Moon and Shakespeare and Snake, yeah. But the guys in the platoon that I remember, we had this big lumberjack. His name was Slavsky, and of course we called him Ski. And a guy named Dale Hardesty, he was from Gary, Indiana. And Bob Neiman, Bob was from Grand Isle, Nebraska. And we had a lieutenant, his name was Paul Tank. That was the name of the lieutenant. We had a sergeant. What was Young's first name?
I don't know what Sergeant Young's first name was.
But he was an ex-drill instructor, real nice guy. And like I say, I got out to Bush in February, and then Foxy came out with a couple guys. Foxy and a guy named Ken Metcalf, who we called Tennessee, and a guy named Dave Bolin, who we called Hick. And they split us up on the tanks and such. And on my tank it was Eddie Myers as the tank commander, and I was the gunner at the time. And this guy named Shakespeare was the driver. And I can't remember who was loaded for us at that time. But of the 5 tanks, all 5 tanks from Alpha Company were there at Charlie 2. And Alpha 1-1 was known as the Lemon, and Alpha 1-2 was known as Sidewinder. Alpha 1-3 was known as the Hulk. Alpha 1-4, my tank was Bleeding Eyes. And Alpha 1-5 was Virgil's tank, and that was Stinkfinger. And our company commander at that time was Captain Patterson. And then he was later replaced with Captain Wunsch, Michael Wunsch. And everybody got along really, really well. I mean, it was just that we're all bound together. We had one black guy in the outfit at that time. His name was Ron Floyd, and another kid named Jack Pierce. He was in the country, and he had been pinned down by a sniper for about an hour, and he just shook like this all the time. And Shakespeare, he got pinned down the same day, and everybody on his crew was knocked out, and he stuttered after that until he started reciting Shakespeare. And then he spoke just, you could say Shakespeare.
Shakespeare's father was a colonel in the Marine Corps too.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
But we lived in dye markers there on Charlie 2, big bunkers under the ground. They had 12th Marines were there with their 105s, of course. There were a few Army people there, but not many when I got there. What do you think of Bruce?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I arrived in Vietnam in November of '67, the last part of November. And when I arrived, McCartney was my tank commander. I arrived went Da Nang, and then went up to Phu Bai, and from there went to Charlie 2. And that's where I hooked up with my tank commander, and Ed and I, Eddie Myers, who came to be the tank commander of Alpha 1-4, we were both on Alpha 1-5 at Charlie 2 for a while with Workman, Corporal Workman, and Corporal McCartney. And shortly after that, we moved to Contin. We spent Christmas at Contin, and Lieutenant Jim Coyne was my platoon leader. And I'm not sure who was my captain then, but later on it was Captain Ronald J. Patterson. And then later on it was Captain Wunsch. But yeah, I extended. I did a total of 21 months. I met Jan when he first come to the platoon, and he went. Was you the driver?
I was a gunner at first.
The gunner first for Eddie Myers. Later on, Bruce came in March. No, February of '69, and he was my driver. And my loader was Ronald Floyd. He was the black guy, great guy. And my gunner was our mechanic, Snake. I couldn't tell you what his name. I cannot remember his name. But
I don't know. He was from Sarasota, Florida, like
yeah,
that.
he was from Sarasota, Florida. But then later on, I want to say May of '69, I was transferred over to the 2nd Platoon where he was at, and I became the platoon sergeant for 2nd Platoon under, at that time, Captain Wunsch was the platoon leader and company commander attached to the 2nd Platoon. And we've many operations that we're on. I know that these two guys here, Alpha 1-4 and Bruce Fox, we were on an operation just west of Charlie 2, between Charlie 2 and Contin, in the hill, very hilly country there. And we were working with the 2nd Marines, no, 9th Marines. And at that time, the company commander that was Company D with the 9th Marines happened to be General Chapman's son, Captain Chapman. And we were also working with a platoon of...
No, two platoons
of Army tanks. And I can remember something about they were gas instead of diesel, but they were M48s, but I don't know whether the A3s or A1s, but they were gas models, and they made a heck of a lot of noise. But we were on this operation, and it was getting dark, and we had to go across a rice paddy down into a gully and up on a ridge, and Company D was digging in. And I was the only tank of our platoon that made it across the gully. And we started up the ridge, and we started taking incoming fire. A bunch of small rocket fire, small rifle fire, and a few machine gun, and I don't know, was there some mortars too, the 80s that hit in there a couple of times on top of the ridge. Seemed like they were, everything was just went to pieces. It was it was an all-out firefight, is what it was.
We came up on it. As we came up, there was 2 hills, and there you can see the green tracers coming across and the red tracers.
Yeah.
And we told these Army guys not to go up that hill because we knew it was mine. And they went up anyway, like 4 tanks at a time. And all you hear is boom, boom, boom. So Virgil went over with the first wave, and he knew that was mined over there. I stayed on the other side of the rice paddy.
Yeah, and I could hear, I was about halfway up. I'm telling you, it was one of these nights you could not see the hand in front of your face. I was about halfway up the ridge, and that's when they started, excuse the language, the shit broke loose. And I could look back and I could see 1-4 and 1-3. They were just pouring bullets with 90mm cannons into that other side of that hill. I remember looking at Jan's tank, and his .30 caliber machine gun tip was red. In the dark, it was red. And I told my driver, who was Bruce Fox, I says, we can't. I can't see. The grunts are digging in, and we can't see. Them. I said, I'm going to get out of the tank, and I'm going to ground guide you up there, so up the hill. So I got out of the tank, and I took Bruce by the hand, and we were ground guided slowly up the hill just to make sure we wasn't going to run over any grunts. And I was trying to stay out of any particular spot that didn't have brush on it too, because that's normally where they had the mines. And we were almost to the top, man. Bruce was saying, "Man, get in! The bullets are bouncing everywhere. There were bullets, ping, ping off the."
That's right, man. I'm hearing it.
You hear the pings off the hull, that thick, boom, boom. And I said, "We're almost there. We're almost there." Well, we got to the very top, and the left track hit a mine. Yeah, and of course it blew me about 30 or 40 feet. I was unconscious, and Foxy got out. Bruce got out to check on me and help call a medevac in, and also help report to you guys that I'd been hit. I don't know, it came over the radio that I'd been hit. And,
yeah, we heard the boom, and somebody come screaming across the air.
Yeah.
Virgil's hit.
Yeah.
And anyway, Foxy and the 9th Marines, they helped get me medevaced out, and I spent 30 days back in the rear. Then I came back, and not too long after I come back, that was in March, April, in the last of May, I was transferred over to his platoon, and we went on several operations together. And I've got one. You guys remember that operation we talked about last night, where we went down and Cam Lowe was working with 3-3, and we went down and captured the Chinese machine gun and the SK rifle and miscellaneous gear. That's all documented there. So we took out several NVA there, and also some ammo dumps and stuff like that. But we were in operations. I went on 3 of the Lamson, all the Lamsons, the Lamson operations I was on. Lamson 250, 263, and 271. And I know Eddie Meyer's not here. He's sergeant. He was his sergeant back then, but Eddie's in poor health. But Eddie and I went on all 3 of those operations.
Okay, well, I was with 2nd Platoon, and there was about 10 of my guys that we all went through tank school together, and Oceanside there, and we all went over together, and but we got split up obviously when we were there. I'll just try to remember some of the names. The first tank I was on was with Sergeant Bonilla. And then we had a mechanic on our tank. His name was Burkos, wasn't it? Burkos. And that's the only guys I remember on the tank, except for, I'll just quote some of the other guys that I was in school with, which was Frank Remkwich. We call him Tree because he was about 6'3" or 4". And another, he's from California. I think he's got a doctorate degree in education now. I've been to see him a couple different times because the last tank I was on was with him. And I'll get that story in a second. But then Wart and names are kind of hard for me even now. And back then, going to be kind of a mystery. But we went out on quite a few operations and shot at quite a bit. And I'll kind of switch a little bit to probably the thing I know best, probably, or remember the most, is the last battle we won, which is Captain Winch got killed. And he was 2 tanks over from me. And my tank was broke down in the rear, and I was a tank commander, so I figured I wouldn't have to go, being 8 days before I would have to rotate. So I said, this is great at the end. But Frank Remkwich, because we had gone over there together, come and asked me that he had 2 rookies on the tank with him. Would I go with him, as a support so we could go home together? And reluctant, I agreed. I agreed to do that. He said, you can do anything you want. So I drove the tank. And we were out for probably about 3 or 4 days. And it was almost like a Hollywood movie the last day or so when we parked, because you could look up into the openings without the trees, and you could actually see the North Vietnamese going across the open path, holding trees and to camouflage themselves. But they were so far away from, I had the binoculars, but they were so far away we didn't shoot at them, but it was like a Hollywood scene that you could see them, and we knew that they were there. We knew that we were going to get hit. So what we did was we stood 50-50 watch that night between myself and Remkwich, stayed up half the night, and the other guys we call Animal, which his last name is Turner. Dave Turner. Now, I can't remember the third guy that was with us. But what ended up happening is Frank and I were talking about we were getting ready to leave, by that time, 5 days. Well, all of a sudden the RPG started hitting the tank. And I emptied my 45, and then I just started screaming for Frank Remkwich to start shooting the 90. And as they tried to get on the radios melted, they were gone. And the hydraulics, we tried to do them, they were out also. So the only thing could do was hand crank the barrel. And what ended up happening is Turner was on the back, and he just kind of dropped inside the tank, was on the floor along with the original loader. And so Frank and he started loading, and as the 90 was going off, the front gun mounts got hit with the RPGs, and the gun tube was just flopping like a dish rag. So they would crank a little bit, and then I would pull on the barrel and try to shift it back and forth, because my idea and concept was just to scan the barrel back and forth and fire as many knives we could with the flechette rounds and the canister rounds of anything oncoming, because obviously we knew they were out there. So we fired every shot we had, and so after that there was a lull. So Frank and I got out of the tank, and we had to pull Dave Turner out of the tank because he was very, very badly injured. And so Frank and I pulled him out of the tank and carried him to the middle of the compound where the corpsmen were. Luckily, they hit him with morphine immediately, and he was okay. Well, he wasn't okay, but his pain was gone. And so then, as Frank and I were walking back to the tank, Frank collapsed because he had shrapnel on his legs. Didn't know it, or his feeling wasn't there immediately. So I ended up carrying him on my shoulder back to the corpsman again, And at that point in time, the corpsman was so busy, he just threw me the bandages, and I cut his pants, and I bandaged him up. I went back to the tank one last time, and the guy was kind of aware, so I told him to crank the tube all the way to the rear and to pull all the 90 rounds out of the honeycombs and put them in the ready racks in case we got hit again. Then I went back to check on the guys one more time, and unbeknownst to myself, that I had blood coming out of my ears, which I got both of my eardrums blown out, didn't know it at the time. And plus I had gotten shrapnel in my back where the RPG's hitting 2 or 3 feet from me out in front of the driver's hatch there. But at that point in time, we all got medevaced, and I'll never forget, probably the biggest thing is I helped, didn't think I was that bad, so I helped all the wounded get on the helicopter as we were taking fire also. And I was really one of the last, and I had forgotten that after the wounded got on first, then the dead. And I'll never forget, probably the thing was I had to look face to face with Captain Winch and the dead terror on his face that I'll never forget. But then I never really conveyed the whole story until about 40 years later. I was in a counseling program, and a guy walked up to me that was in the group, a Marine, and with me, and gave me a book, and it was called Marine Battles in Vietnam.
Marine Corps Tank Battles in
Yes.
Vietnam.
And I laid it down for a couple of days or a week or whatever, and then finally I said, well, I'm going to see if they got this year in there. And then, of course, I opened it up, and my hair stood on the back of my neck because my name was in there. They had interviewed Turtle, and he had mentioned my name in the book. Then it mentioned Oliver North. And so I bought his book and realized his machine gunner
Randy Harrod.
had written a book. And lo and behold, after reading his book, came to the realization of he had to be right beside my tank because of the fact he made mention in his book that the 2 tanks to the right of him, which was Captain Winch, and the other tank, which Didell got killed, a kid from California, and also
Our corpsman.
Navy Corpsman Colson, wasn't his name?
Michael Colton.
Colton. And so those tanks didn't fire a shot, but the Randy Harrod said that he was ready to be overrun, and he didn't know which way to run because there was no direction to run. But then the tanks started opening up and firing in front of him and mowing down the aggressing enemy, and he was firing in between us. And I realized later what he was doing is as we were loading, there was a short lull between loading the 90s every time, and he was opening up with a machine gun. And then, of course, Oliver North was behind us, and of course, I never knew the Randy Harrod story, nor did I even know Oliver North was there. Of course, Oliver North was, a second lieutenant or something, so
Called him Blue.
I didn't, Blue and Blues Bastards, which was part of the infantry. And then, of course, I also read the part about Oliver North getting up on the tank with Captain, and to confirm the fact that they did see enemy out there. And I'm just quoting the book more or less and saying that they confirmed that they were, that we would all be alerted. And then Oliver North turned and walked off the back and got blown off the back, and that's when the first RPG hit, and it hit the tank and sheared up and got Captain Winch.
You had a flame tank with you that day, didn't you?
We had no flame tanks.
No flame tanks were there?
We had a blade tank with us.
All these guys were in that. Bruce was there too.
Yeah.
And so was,
When that battle started, that was on July 25th, 1969. Second platoon, first platoon hooked up, and we went up and picked up third platoon at Contienne. And then we started moving northwest. And a couple tanks got bogged down in rice paddies, and we had to pull them out. And we were moving for a long time, it seemed like. And then we came to this old French road, and we stopped for the night. And man, it was a scary night. I'd never been out in there before, over the marketplace there. And morning came and we had all our tanks online and we were running parallel to the Benha River. And it was nothing but bomb craters and short grass. And all the infantry were out in front of us walking. It was like in a movie. And you could see Oliver North's crew come off a hill and come out to join us at Kilo 33. So we're moving and it's it just kind of dropped away from us everywhere to Ben Ha. And then there was rolling hills that started shortly, small ones, then bigger ones, and then bigger ones. And the lead element, or AO, is call sign was Sky King. He saw a whole bunch of North Vietnamese crossing in front of us. He said they're carrying bushes. So we went up on the highest hill that we could find, and we set up for the night, the next night. And we set in, like in a wagon train, and guns went out from us. And we were all trying to see those Vietnamese moving around, but nobody could see them. But we had 50% that night, Fox and I, we always stayed awake at the same time. And next morning, about 6 o'clock in the morning, you hear, and I thought, what the heck is that? Here it was mortars. They had been running around the mortar, dropping them in as fast as they could. And they hit us with 40 mortars, and the first one hit right in the middle of our compound. We had a lieutenant, his name was Ralston. He got hit in the back with three little slivers of shrapnel. He was screaming like he was gut shot. And Doc Colton, who was also hit between the eyes right here, went over and pulled him out of his back and said, "You'll be all right, But we were with a guy named Bill Franker. His nickname was Creech. And he was with the 2nd platoon. And he was running across the perimeter when a mortar went off behind him and just peppered his back and butt and legs with shrapnel. And it knocked him down. And he couldn't get up on his tank because he couldn't bend over. So he rolled underneath the tank till that barrage was over. And then they unlocked the hatches and get him back in, And then they called the medevacs in and they took Creech out of there. Well, then we left that hill and we started moving south. And we're coming up to this one hill, and this black staff sergeant said, "We're on this hill in 1966 and we got the shit kicked out of us." He said, "There's a training camp around here or something." So we went up on Butter's Ridge and set up. And half of that hill was open and half of it was wooded. And I told Foxy to back the tank up to a bomb crater so nobody could jump up behind my tank. And our platoon was kind of down in this little swale, and 2nd platoon went up over the hill with the captain. And so we set up, and our blade tank, Alpha 4-2, what's Harry's last name?
I can't pronounce it. It starts with an S.
Sassaman or something.
Sassaman. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was in that blade tank. And Captain Wunsch called me and told me to go down and pull that tank back up the hill because the final drives are broke off of it. And I thought, oh man, if we do that, we're going to have to take that empty spot over there on the open side of the hill, and we'll be, at night we'll be silhouetted. And I told Fox, I said, well, we got to do it, let's go. So as soon as he started the engine, Captain Wunsch called back and said, disregard, we'll have 2-3 do it because it's a Mod B, M48AB Mod B new tank. So they went down and pulled Harry's tank up and put it beside my tank. And then they took that empty spot on the hill. Well, we're down there and we're filling up water cans in this little creek and stuff, bringing them back up to the tank. And I jumped back up on the tank, and we had a little sawed-off shotgun about that big in the Bissell rack. And I never loaded it or anything, and I picked it up and it went off right here. And my loader was right here, Eddie Myers. And he grabbed the side of his head, and I thought, oh my God, I killed Eddie. And Captain Wunsch come down there, and he was yelling and screaming, who fired that round? I said, I fired it, Captain. I didn't check it when I picked it up. He said, I want to see you tomorrow when we get back. I'm going to have some things for you to do. I said, yes, sir. And it's always pissed me off that he was mad at me when he got killed. But then we set in, they set an LP out, on this hill. We're sitting there and starting to get dark. Right around 10 o'clock, Fox and I had the first watch. You hear this boom, 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 boom going on over on this hill. And it was Claymore Mines. And this kid got on the radio and he was scared to death. We got movement, they're everywhere. We got, I think, 7 or 9, I forget what she said. We got 7 or 9 of them with the claymores. So they said, just stay in place until we tell you to come in. So, man, we're sitting there and nothing's going on. So our watch ended, and Eddie Myers and Bill Crawley was my gunner and Eddie was my loader then. They took over. And Fox and I went back on the back of the tank to try to get some rest. About 3 o'clock in the morning, hell broke loose. They started with mortars and RPGs. You could hear RPGs hitting the tanks, and I looked up and it looked just like this, like a cobweb with tracers going over it. And I reached over and grabbed him and I told him, don't move, until this dies down a little bit. And finally it died down. I said, you got to get to the driver's compartment. Well, he jumps in the turret. And we couldn't shoot with him in there because, the breech block comes back. I said, Fox, you got to go. You got to get to the driver's compartment. So he says, okay, you cover me. And I stood up in the,
TC's that.
yeah, the cupola. I had that M16 and I put it on full automatic and I said, go. And he jumped up and I'm shooting and he's jumping in front of me and I'm pulling the gun over like this. And finally he got to the driver's compartment.
It's true.
Well then,
He threw me an extra magazine.
yeah, and I threw him,
45.
he didn't have any rounds for his 45, so I threw him some 45s too. Well, then all hell was breaking loose, and you know how you get into combat, you're just zeroed in right in front of you. And we started this fire in this valley with our tracers. And you could see those Vietnamese running in front of that fire. It was just like a shooting gallery. That you're knocking them down and they weren't moving. And then we heard these guys getting whacked up on the hill up there. And then he came across Captain Whiskey, Kilo India Alpha, and I thought, oh my God. In that Creech's tank, whose spot I was supposed to have been in, got hit, and the loader and driver, or loader and gunner, both got killed. And I can't remember who was TC in that tank at the time. But then he started coming in with, what were you, Corporal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I know one person that was on that tank that we're referring to, and his name was Abbott. That was his last
Yeah,
name.
that's Ward.
Ward, you call him, but his name was, trying to think.
Bruce Abbott.
Bruce Abbott. I'm thinking he was from Detroit or somewhere. But, and he had the other people killed. I don't know where the fourth one was, but my understanding, he couldn't fire by himself. And my understanding was that he pulled a 30 caliber machine gun out of the tank and was firing on the hip, from his hip.
Yeah.
And,
Silver Star.
Yeah.
That must have been the tank that Renfro was on too. Because Renfro got blown off the tank and he was wounded and he got back up on the tank and a Chinese Chi-Com went off in front of him and blew him back off the tank. And then he got back up on the tank again and caught 2 AKs in his leg.
Big target. He was about 6
Yeah,
foot.
he was a big guy.
6'3".
And Wart was on that tank and he couldn't get up to get into the,
Yeah, I
because the
remember.
fire was so hard.
And also, Renfro went back to school. I think he got his master's degree and taught school. He and his wife showed up one time in Atlanta, and we went to eat dinner together and talked a little bit. I'm thinking he was either from Mississippi or Missouri, one of the two.
But another thing I remember about that night was we called in Spooky, and he came over and you heard that, those guns going off, and you could have dropped a pin, you could hear a pin drop, And then they started shooting illumination from Charlie 2, and when it came over and went off, it brightened the whole hill up, but you could hear that with those big canisters coming down. And you could hear them hitting. I told Foxy, man, if we get hit with one of those canisters, it's going to kill us, And we're trying to get medevacs to come in to get these guys out. And for some reason, those weren't Marine helicopters that come in, were they? They were Army, because the Marines wouldn't come in because it was still in progress and it was dark. But they sent sea nights out. And you could, when they were landing, remember that sound? You asked me what that sound was? It was going, and I'm thinking, I don't know. And then it hit me. Those were bullets going through those helicopters coming down. Those guys had to have balls that big. And I told him, I said, you better button up, because if they hit that aviation fuel, this whole hill's going to go up, you know. But they never did. And then once they got those guys out of there, then I had to send my loader and gunner to those other tanks, because there wasn't anybody on them.
There was only one person left on my tank.
Yeah, and Fox and I were the only two on the tank.
I tried to stay, but one of the corpsmen just, I guess he saw, and he just put a tag on my belt, said, no, you're going. So I just stayed there. But I'll never forget, as we were going up in the helicopter, I heard those rounds, and I went, oh my God, I can't believe this. You know, we did the battle, you know, we're here, and then all of a sudden we're going to get shot right out of the sky, you know, trying to make it to the hospital. And I said, what else can happen, you know? Yeah,
that was horrible. And then Fox and I were the only two on the tank, and I'm going down loading the guns and coming up and firing them. And we shot every bullet, every shell we had.
I don't think there was anything left on our tank.
The only thing we had left was 2 heat rounds. I had an M14, M16, and 45. I had a shotgun. We had a bloop gun. We had a little grease gun. And we fired every one of them until they were empty. And it started getting light. And I thought, oh, thank God, you know, we're going to get out of this. And if they would have hit us one more time, they would have annihilated us. I mean, everybody was out of ammo.
So many people that weren't there, dead or wounded.
Yeah.
I missed it. I was, when they moved out on the 25th, I jumped in my tank, and Captain once said, no, says you're leaving in 2 days, 3 days, you're rotating back. I said, you're not going. I said, no, I'm going. He says, no, you're not. And so I was in the night that once was killed. I was in Quang Tru processing out. I left the day, the 29th.
And I remember the next morning, we, you know, all those tanks, Grady's tank, you could take your finger and push the gun tube up and down like that. And I mean, that rocket hit right on the trunnion bar and snapped that sucker. And God, I don't know how many penetrations you guys had. There was a lot of penetrations on that tank.
And I could only just, you know, I know there was more than 4, because Rimquish got 2 up through the TC, and I actually witnessed 2, you know, that were put shrapnel on my back and everything. But yeah, we got hit with probably about 5 to 7. But if I hadn't pulled that gun, and I saw it today. When I saw it today, I thought about that gun tube and pulling it back and pushing it, you know, because it was just like I said, because it was taking. The biggest reason I did that was because of the fact that, you know, normally it was a recoil, and then we could load and he could turn it, but I was just freaked out because there was so much time lapsing, because the thing was just flopping around like a dish rag, and I knew that we weren't going to be able to shoot a straight line with it just flopping like that. So I would try to grab it and, you know, kind of hold it and push it and pull it and whatever, to try to see if we could stabilize it to get the next shot off, you know, so we could, and then just scan back and forth in front of us.
And then another thing we had to contend with was that LP coming back in. You know, all shit it broke loose, and we're firing. I can hear Foxy down there popping rounds with his 45, and they said, cease fire, the LP's coming in. Well, hell, we didn't even know where the LP was. So everybody had to stop firing until they got in. You know, once they got in, they said, okay, commence firing.
How many tanks were totally disabled?
Well, there was 4 tanks that we had to tow 1 back, and 3 of them made it back on their own power.
Now I think mine cranked, because I did it one time, cranked it up and tried to pull it back. Of course, that was the initial when we tried to do the radios,
right,
you know, and all that kind of stuff. I tried to fire it up, and it cranked up. I backed it up one time back.
Well, I know the one that they towed back was Harry's tank, that blade tank, because the final drives broke over.
But
But we went through an area that next morning. We looked out there where the fire was. There wasn't a body anywhere. And somebody that run one of the Vietnamese over. And they backed up off the body. And the AK was crushed right through his chest. We picked that up and jacked around in it and fired it. We thought, man, that's a hell of a weapon right there. So then we left. There was a lot of blood trails and body parts and stuff laying out there, but no bodies. And we left, and Oliver North's group, then they went and looked, for the bodies, and they said they were stacked like cordwood. But we come to an area coming back, and we stopped, and it looked exactly like the moon. I mean, there was no vegetation. The trees were all dead. Bomb craters everywhere. No bugs, no birds and that shit. And that was all that Agent Orange stuff. And I remember jumping off the tank, and it was like baby powder poofing up all over your legs. And I thought, man, this is some shit. And Johnny Miller, remember Johnny Miller? He took over. I think he was driving your tank back.
Okay.
Yeah, he come out and he said, man, this is some nasty shit, isn't it? I said, yeah, it's real nasty. And my gunner that night was a guy named Bill Crowley, Crowley, and he had been bounced around a lot. And I called him here, well, it's been quite a while now, and he lived in Norwood, Massachusetts, and he runs a funeral home up there. And I called him, I said, is this Billy? And he goes, Billy? And I said, yeah, Billy, this is Turtle, your tank mirror. Oh, God, Turtle, he started. And that was pretty cool. So I got to talk to him.
But one thing I'd like to clear up is, as we were firing, and I know for one thing for sure that I remember looking up, we set the whole woods on fire. Mm-hmm. And once we set the whole woods on fire out in front of us, that way I was able to look to the right and saw the two silhouette tanks. But I heard this later on, but knew it wasn't really the case, because I know for a fact we never left a tank out in the field, never. And it was kind of said, or read it in the book, that Oliver North had brought up that we, remember they taught us that you could put those canister things in the tank and burn them up. But I know for a fact that we set the woods on fire, and that's what he saw. That had to be what he saw, because I don't think the tanks were on fire at all.
He was up on that hill looking down on us, and we had that fire down there between our tank and
we had fires all around the perimeter, and he thought we set two tanks on fire, and that we brought them up. That was kind of a pride thing.
Because we needed the tracks and stuff.
We would have tracks blown off, we would have all kinds of, but we all chipped in, and we made sure the wheels or the tracks were on there enough.
Yeah, I know.
We would drag them back somehow, even if we had to
we brought them all
tanks
back.
and tanks together.
When I read that in his book, I got the after action report off of that website from the Texas A&M. They do a chronological day by day thing on every unit, by day. Mm-hmm. And it said that we got hit, and we had to tow one tank, and the other three made it back on their own power. So I know we brought them back.
And I know for pride that, we never left a tank out.
What he was thinking of is there was two tanks that got blown up outside the washout, and they were still out there. Remember those tanks? Mm-hmm. And they did have to do that.
There were some old M48s that were out there back that were left in the 65 in some battles out there, because we ran up on them doing sweeps. Searching.
Yeah, they were still out there, and they're all welded together and stuff.
Yeah.
That was the old M48s were from when.
I thought it was from Buffalo, Operation Buffalo or something.
It could have been.
But they left them out in the
They
bush.
just left them.
They just left them, yeah. And then my brother come to see me. He was a gunner on my tank for 5 days. Boy, did he get his eyes open. He was with 1-7. He was a forward observer. And we were supposed to get overrun every night he was there. That was in March. They said there was